Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers. Friday, November 19th, 2021. We're coming towards the end of the college football regular season. We have tomorrow and then Thanksgiving weekend, and then it'll be all the conference championships after that. So this season has gone by very fast, as it normally does, and we'll talk college football with the money leader of college football, Kyle Hunter. He will join us in just a moment. Also, Paul Bovi will join us in about 15 minutes to talk NFL for Week 11. So we have all of that straight ahead. But before we get to Kyle, we want to tell you about BetMGM, and you know who they are. They're the king of sports books. And for new players only, bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. That's right, bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. New players only, must be 21 years or older to be eligible. Also in the following betting legal states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. Only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. All right, let's talk college football. Kyle Hunter, he is the money leader at Vegas Insider, and he's had a great season. He has not let up yet. He may say that bad week is coming, but he has not let up. He's wearing his Bengals gear. He's ready for Sunday against Vegas. But Kyle, this week, though, a lot to talk about. First, let's begin with, I hate to say it, but your Ohio State Buckeyes. They got a big game coming up against Michigan State. Buckeyes, big favorite. Spartans need this win if they want to have a shot at the Big Ten title. But your thoughts here on Ohio State laying a bunch against the Spartans?
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of points, but I do think it's justified. Ohio State has played very good offensively in spots here so far this year, and this Michigan State defense has not impressed me all that much this course of the season. And Kenneth Walker's been great on offense. I do think Michigan State can probably score in this game because I still don't trust my Buckeyes defense, especially pass defense-wise. Ohio State is 70th at PFF in coverage grade. Thorne can probably complete some big gainers here for Michigan State, but I don't see how Michigan State is going to slow down Ohio State in this game. The wide receivers at Ohio State are so good. Jackson Smith and Jigba, considered their third best receiver, and most teams in the country, he'd be their top receiver easily. Ohio State's so good at wide receiver. Henderson, a star in the backfield. Stroud's really coming into his own. It's hard to believe, Buckeyes fans were so hard on him early in the season, and now here he is, the second favorite to win the Heisman. This Michigan State team ranks 100th in pass play success rate allowed. I don't think that bodes very well, Kevin, against a Ohio State team that's been throwing the ball around a lot. Number 2 in the nation in pass play success rate. Ohio State can do it on the ground if they want to as well. 3rd in yards per carry on the season so far. So I expect Michigan State to be down likely late in this game and pushing hard to score. So I kind of like the over in this game. It is a very high total, but 68.5, I'll lean over the total. Tempo-wise, these two teams, 42nd and 43rd out of 130 teams. Fast enough pace, some explosive plays. If I had to bet the side, I'd lay the points with Ohio State, but I like the over a little bit better.
Just want to go back to one thing, Kyle. Ohio State's in the top 4 for the college football playoff right now. They've been so dominant of late. I know the Nebraska game, they kind of struggled, but what happened going back to the Oregon game? Like, why did they get into that big hole early? Then you look back and you say, how did they lose that game? I mean, Oregon's a very good team, but how did they lose the game the way they did at the Shoe a while ago?
I mean, Ohio State moved the ball a lot in that game. They just got in the red zone and couldn't do anything in the red zone because, you look back at the box score, Ohio State had 612 yards and only 28 points. So offensively, they didn't really struggle very much. Defensively, gave up nearly 300 yards on the ground, which is surprising. I do think they've kind of shored up the rushing defense a bit, but I do think Walker can have some success here. Like I said, I trust the Ohio State offense a heck of a lot more than I trust the Ohio State defense. I still think the defense will probably keep them from winning something big this year if they would happen to get into the playoffs. I don't think Ohio State's good enough to win at all. I hope I'm wrong as a fan, though.
Now, let's go to that Oregon-Utah game in the Pac-12. Obviously, a big game there. And the Ducks, a short dog against a pretty good Utah team. And again, for Oregon, you're kind of in must-win mode the rest of the way because a loss for them, they're knocked out.
Yeah, I like Whittingham as a coach quite a bit. I respect him a lot. He's been a moneymaker, ATS in the long term. I have to lean Utah in this game. Oregon has played them tough in recent years, and I would think this will be a close game. One I'm very excited to see, and I think it's important to point out Salt Lake City, home game, tremendous home field advantage, especially the time that this game is going to be played at. So Utah's really rounded into form with Cam Rising as quarterback. Most people thought Brewer would work out pretty well there, including me. He didn't. Cam Rising took over, and they've been much better. The Utes have played a tougher schedule, 36th in strength of schedule according to Sagarin, and Oregon is 63rd. The two teams are almost exactly tied in yards per play margin. Utah just barely ahead. Oregon has +9 turnover margin. So Oregon has really been helped by the turnover luck. And I do think that, in a large part, a lot of turnovers can be fortunate bounces. Utah can pressure the opposing quarterback, and I don't really trust Anthony Brown under pressure. Can Utah slow down the Oregon running game is the biggest key for the Utah defense, because Oregon's going to want to run in this game. And, I think it's a fair question to say, who would have thought Utah would be first in the Pac-12 and yards per carry so far this year in Pac-12 play? 6.09 yards per carry. To be fair, that was definitely helped a lot by Stanford doing nothing on defense against them. Just a terrible effort from Stanford. But, it's still impressive to me, and that's baked into the average. I just think Salt Lake City, a really tough place to play. I have to lean Utah in this game.
All right, now let's look at the American, another team on the outside looking in. They need a little bit of luck if they want to get in that top four, Cincinnati. And they take on a pretty good SMU team on Saturday. The Bearcats favored here, obviously laying 10.5. And with Cincinnati, Kyle, it feels like they went through that stretch. They beat Notre Dame. It was a really good win. Now, last couple of weeks against the American, they've had some struggles. They pulled away and won. They're just better than them. But now Cincinnati feels like they need another kind of blowout. They need something impressive here because time's running out on them.
Yeah, Cincinnati, it's hard to say what's going on there, but they have a lot of pressure on them. Obviously, they can't lose a game. And it feels like this team has not played very well under this pressure. They've certainly played their worst games here of late. In fact, if you look at Cincinnati's worst 3 defensive performances of the year, according to PFF grades, they're the last 3 weeks. I do think the Cincinnati defense is really good, and the Bearcats secondary is a major strength. SMU will need to run the football here a little bit to have success, because I don't think they can just air it out constantly. Having said that, this SMU offense, I think, is the best offense Cincinnati's played this year. I know Notre Dame's a good team, but Notre Dame offensively not as much of a juggernaut as SMU has. SMU has some tremendous wide receivers, so it's definitely going to test Cincinnati in a game like this. What do we make of SMU's defense? SMU is 29th in defensive success rate, which makes it sound like they're pretty good on defense, but they give up a ton of big plays, 57 plays of 20 yards or more so far this year, which is just terrible. They're 125th out of 130 teams in the country in explosiveness allowed. It's crazy to see a total of 65 points with Cincinnati, but it's justified to me. And if anything, I'd probably lean to the over in this one. But I lean the SMU side in this one. I want to see Cincinnati pull away from a good team. I wouldn't want to lay this many points with them. I think Cincinnati probably wins, but I think this would be a big test for them.
Now, in the ACC, Kyle, when you look at Wake Forest, this is a team that could be the ACC championship, and yet they're still an underdog coming up tomorrow against Clemson. And Wake needs to, at worst, split 2 games to be the ACC championship. Clemson Saturday, then Boston College next week. It's not a lock, but they got to win one of those 2 to get in. And Clemson, who has not been the Clemson of old this year, they still have an outside shot. But what do you think about the Tigers here as a favorite at home against a really talented Wake Forest offense?
Yeah, I mean, don't you think that this line kind of looks a bit weird? You see Clemson favored by 4.5, and it almost seems like one of those fishy lines. And I don't really like, saying a line is fishy, because so many people just use that as a, excuse to pass on a game. And, Vegas knows, and everybody knows who's going to win this one. I don't really like that narrative very much, but this is a line that kind of stands out to me as a bit suspicious. It seems like they're asking you to take Wake Forest in this game. And as far as my breakdown on this game, I have to pass on this game as far as betting anything, but I do want to give some stats that I think would be helpful to viewers and listeners. Dave Clawson has been a machine in general. As an underdog, 46-34 against the spread, so he's in that role here. To me, the problem with Wake Forest is their defense is so weak. And I know that Clemson's offense has not been good, especially their passing offense. But with Shipley, their running game has been a bit better here of late. And if you look at just their recent games, Clemson's been able to move the ball on the ground. All you have to do is point to, the Army game, other games like that, where Wake Forest has been just terrible run defense wise. 115th in rushing play success rate on defense. I think Clemson can move the ball. Sam Hartman has been fantastic. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten a little bit more Heisman hype, to be honest. He ranks 5th in PFF grade among quarterbacks so far this year. I don't like betting overs with Clemson based on their defense being so good and their offense being weak. But Wake Forest has a way of making games high scoring. I kind of sound like a broken record here today. I'm leaning to the over in this one. And for people who follow along with me, normally I do like to bet a lot of unders. So it's interesting that I'm leaning toward a lot of these overs. I think if I had to bet this game on the side, I'd probably bet Wake Forest, but I'd rather just pass.
All right, so it should be an interesting game tomorrow in the ACC. In the Big 12, Kansas State and Baylor, Kyle. And Baylor off that huge win over Oklahoma. And Kansas State's played well. You got to give Kansas State some credit here down the stretch. But, you look at Baylor, letdown spot. Is that the case? And you go to Manhattan where it's never easy to win.
Yeah, I like Kansas State in this game. I think Baylor off that huge win. Kansas State's really played well of late, and two good coaching staffs. I think this is a really fascinating matchup. I'm looking forward to watching this game. Chris Kleiman has been absolute money in the bank against the spread, 21-9 last 30 games against the spread. The guy's a moneymaker. I don't want to bet against him against a Baylor team in a tough spot coming to Manhattan. I think it's important to point out that Skylar Thompson is better than most people think he is. This Kansas State offense has been very solid. They move the ball very slowly down the field, very methodical. And the Wildcats defense has been really good in recent weeks. If you look at the schedule throughout the course of the season, Kansas State's defense doesn't look great. But if you just start looking at last 4 or 5 games, their defense has been really good. And Kevin, I think we've reached a point in the season where it matters a lot more to me what you've done in conference play than it did, what you did in week 1, 2, or 3 of the season. So I think Kansas State, if you look at the more recent weeks, this Kansas State defense looks very good. Now, Baylor, what can you say negative about them? They've been very good here of late. They pulled off that big upset. But, Baylor doesn't really strike me as a team that's very explosive on offense. I know their yards per play stats are pretty good on offense. Bohannon's a good player. He's been put in good spots. But, Baylor has still played a pretty weak schedule of defenses. This is going to be one of the better defenses they've faced so far this year. I would lean under the total here in this one. And I think Kansas State is worth a play here on the side.
All right. And let's look at 2 more games with you, Kyle. Let's go to the Big Ten again, Iowa and Illinois. And Illinois, they've been so up and down so far this year. They've had some moments. They won at Penn State as a huge dog in that crazy 9 overtime game. They beat Nebraska in the opener. And we know Illinois isn't exactly the class of the Big Ten. But Iowa, they had a nice start. They've had some injuries. They've fallen off. But what do you think here with the Hawkeyes as nearly a 2-touchdown favorite?
There's no way I could lay this many points with this low of a total in a game like this. People who know my style, I'm not laying this many points with the total this low, regardless. Definitely not with Iowa. How could you trust Iowa to cover a big spread like this? Certainly they could. We know anything can happen in one game. I'm not one of those guys that likes to come in and say, oh, this is definitely going to cover, here's some lock. That's definitely not my style in any way. But, how can you trust Iowa to cover a spread like this? Regardless of who's at quarterback for Iowa, they're not very good. They're 121st in yards per play on offense, 119th in rushing play success rate, and 118th in pass play success rate. And the Fighting Illini defense is actually pretty good. Kirby Joseph, a really good safety. He ranks 3rd at PFF in coverage grade among all safeties in the country. Iowa is still throwing the ball quite a bit, even though they're not very good at throwing the ball. I think that this Illinois team has been kind of a sneaky underdog this year. They beat Nebraska. They've pulled off multiple upsets. They won against Minnesota outright. I'm not calling an outright upset here, but I've seen stranger things happen, that's for sure. And I did want to give a system that I think fits this here and is a pretty interesting one that people might like. Conference games, road underdogs of 7 points or more with a total of 45 or lower. And this one's much lower than 45, obviously. So this is a conference game with a road underdog of 7 points or more and a total of 45 or less. 220 covers and 135 non-covers. That's 62% against the spread, taking the road underdog in games like this since 2006. So all this to say, I do like Illinois in this game, and a game that I think should be very low scoring.
All right. And yeah, Bielema's done a good job, keeping Illinois competitive. Definitely, it's not an easy job at all. Final game in Conference USA, North Texas and FIU. And North Texas played a little better here down the stretch. And FIU has just been a complete dumpster fire. Butch Davis has gone after this year. They've had all these problems in the athletic department. It's just been a bad year for FIU, but they're getting 10 at home against North Texas here.
Listen, Kevin, I appreciate that we could talk about this game because I will say, I've had the most success over the long term betting these kind of under the radar games instead of the always the big name matchups. And to me, these are two teams heading in completely different directions. FIU, how can anything that's been going on there lately be a positive for this football team? Butch Davis talking about the program's been sabotaged. The team has really kind of just laid down in some of their recent games. I don't like to use the quit term. I don't know if they've quit on the season. They are college players. They could try in any given spot, but North Texas has been playing quite a bit better here of late. 500 yards, over 500 yards against Southern Miss 2 weeks ago, and then 423 yards against UTEP last week. I don't know how you could bet FIU in a spot like this. FIU has been absolutely blown out of late. North Texas has been running the football very well here of late. FIU not stopping anything, the run, the pass, anything at all. There's not a ton of numbers that I think make this an amazing play or anything. It's just one of those situations where somebody comes out and says they're sabotaging our program from inside and he's going to be gone at the end of the season. I'm thinking, how could you want to bet on FIU in a spot like this? I just don't see it at all. I think this could be a fairly high scoring game. And North Texas minus 10 is a strong lean for me here in this one. I will probably have some money on North Texas in this game.
And FIU has one win, and they beat an FCS school, and I think it's like a 20-game losing streak against FBS schools. It's something crazy with FIU that they were a team that seemed like a few years ago. They beat Miami. Maybe they're going up with Butch Davis, but they've totally gone in the trash over the last few years. Kyle Hunter, his numbers, I have to go over this before I let you go, Kyle. 41, 17, and 1 on Vegas Insider. That's 70.7% plus 22.25. Again, anything can happen any given week, but you have not had the dud yet, Kyle. You have had a fantastic season. You're doing all totals, basically, so keep an eye on that. How many picks you think you're going to have for Saturday?
So I already have 2 plays up, and I think I'll probably add 2 or 3 more plays. Probably going to be 4 or 5 plays this weekend. I do have a little bit lower volume once you get later in the season as the numbers get tighter to my own, especially on the totals. But yeah, it's been a fantastic season. I know there's been a lot of people on board at Vegas Insider, and I appreciate everybody jumping on board and looking forward to another weekend of college football.
All right, Kyle Hunter. Check him out on Twitter also at Kyle Hunter Picks. Also does college basketball as well. So he's getting all set with all those million games we have every single day, it feels like. Kyle, thanks so much. We appreciate the time. Best of luck. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, there is Kyle Hunter. And check out his picks at Vegas Insider. Paul Bovi will join us coming up in just a moment to talk NFL. So looking forward to that. I want to tell you about WynnBET and the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app. You can download on iOS or Android devices. When you download the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app and you're a new patron, you can get a $1,000 risk-free first bet with a $20 minimum first deposit, an eligible sports bet when you use the promo code VI bonus. That means if you lose your first wager, you get it back up to $1,000 as a free bet credit that you can use for another bet. The WynnBET promo code will expire soon, so make sure to grab it while you can. Again, on iOS or Android devices, must be 21 years or older to bet, and also in legal betting states as well. That is WynnBET. All right, now let's move on to our friend Paul Bovi talking NFL. And Paul, good to see you again. Paul, you have been on fire recently. And right now, I got to pull up your number because I had it earlier. But so far, I think you're second in the regular season in units at Vegas Insider. You've turned things around pretty well. How have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been doing great. I wasn't dialed in the preseason, I have to admit, but I'm fully focused on the regular season. It's been going well. We still had a few tough beats. I didn't like losing that Steeler game a few weeks ago against the Bears. You're always going to hone in on those tough beats, but all in all, it's been pretty good. I think I've been running at about 65%, and I think I'm going to finish out strong, Kevin.
32, 17, and 2, 65.3% plus 13-10 since the regular season has hit. So you have been on fire with that one. Let's get to the games, Paul, for this Sunday that we're going to hit on. We're going to talk about 4 of them, and let's begin with, I got it right here. Let's go with the Texans and Titans first. All right, AFC South battle. Tennessee just hasn't stopped, Paul. That they went through that 4-game stretch as an underdog against the Bills, against the Chiefs, against the Colts, against the Rams. Won them all, obviously covered them all. Didn't get the cover last week against the Saints, but they still won that game. Important game to win. Now you get Houston, who's not very good. You got to hope to avoid the letdown. What are your thoughts here in this AFC South battle?
Well, first of all, with respect to last week, I had New Orleans. They took the 3. I feel fortunate in some respects, but the Saints really did outplay them. And Tennessee caught a break from the officials. I believe they only had 280 yards of offense, and they were on their heels at the end of the game. And New Orleans obviously could have tied it with a 2-point conversion. Didn't do so, and I was kind of glad because you don't want those kinds of games to go to overtime. But if you look at this Titans team, and you pointed it out, they went through that 4-game stretch, Bills, Chiefs, Indy, Rams. It's kind of an exhilarating stretch of games. Then you come home, you take care of business against New Orleans, you get that fortunate call, and now you're playing the lowly Texans. And I have to tell you, I'm not sold completely on this Tennessee team. They're not running the ball. Obviously, they lost Derrick Henry, who didn't have a particularly good game against Indy in his last appearance, but the last 2 games, 55 attempts, 138 yards. That's not a recipe for success. Now, when you look at the Texans, yes, they are, as you call it, a dumpster fire. I know I heard that mentioned a few minutes ago, but you've got half of the roster playing on 1-year contracts, meaning they're playing for their job either with the Texans, who probably will get a boatload of picks for Deshaun Watson, or with another team. So I don't think they're going to throw in the towel. They've played commendably at times. You've got Tyrod Taylor in his 2nd game back. The 1st game back was an awful performance, 5 sacks, 3 interceptions in a loss to the Dolphins. But he started the year on fire before he went down, 31 of 44, 3 touchdowns, no picks. So I think the Texans are in a good position to actually not only cover the game, but spring the upset.
Now let's take a look, Paul, at the Eagles and the Saints. We just talked about New Orleans, and they hung with Tennessee last week. No Jameis Winston. They're on Trevor Siemian. They're kind of stuck here at quarterback. Alvin Kamara, we don't know his status for Sunday. He missed the Tennessee game. And the Saints obviously missing their top offensive weapon is hurting this offense. Now they face Philadelphia. You were on the Eagles last week against the Broncos. Convincing win at Denver. Philadelphia has not won a home game yet this season, so they're going to try to turn it around, but they're a short favorite here against New Orleans. A pretty important matchup in the NFC for wildcard purposes.
All right, so I was on the Eagles, and the reason I was on the Eagles is because the Broncos had not 1, not 2, but 3 offensive linemen out, and there 2 of them were really good. And I just figured that Denver just wouldn't get the protection that was necessary to win the football game. But when you look at this Eagle team, these numbers are gaudy. Derek Carr, 31 of 34 for 323. Justin Herbert, 32 of 38. So that's 63 of 72 overall. Completions to attempts. Throw in Patrick Mahomes, who was 24 of 30, and you've got ridiculous numbers at 87 for, I think, 102 or something like that. The defense isn't sound. The offense isn't particularly good. And the Saints are fighting. The Saints threw in a clunker a few weeks ago after that miraculous win over Tampa Bay. They go out, lose to Atlanta, of all teams. And after watching last night, the Falcons' performance, you scratch your head and you wonder, how did that happen? Well, it happened, but I think the Saints are poised to come back here and get the win on the road. I think they're at least 4 points, 3 to 4 points better than the Eagles, which means you're getting line value here. And I think the Saints will win this football game.
All right, so we'll see if the Saints can pull off this victory. And Sean Payton's normally good as a dog. And already this year, they had the win over Tampa Bay, like you mentioned, at home. They won at New England, and that looks like a really good win now for seeing what the Patriots have done. And last week covering against Tennessee, so we'll see if they can do it again at Philadelphia, again, against a team that hasn't won at home yet this season. All right, Paul, we have a wild card rematch from last year, Colts and the Bills. Of course, Phillip Rivers was the quarterback of Indianapolis last year. Carson Wentz is there now. Colts were 1-4, Paul. Now they've won 4 of 5. Maybe not against great teams. They face Buffalo, who's off 2 games against Jacksonville and the Jets. So what are your thoughts here with the Bills, a touchdown favorite against the Colts?
I think Indy is a fraud. And I understand there are people gushing over Carson Wentz. 17 touchdowns, 3 picks, but he's still very reckless with the football. You grab this guy, put him on the wraps, he'll try to pitch the ball out, and it may or may not work, but it could turn into a turnover. I think he's basically been a little bit fortunate to this point. But when you look at this Indy team, they're just not good in the secondary. I'm not sold on their corners. If you look at Lamar Jackson, he had that ridiculous performance against them, 37 of 43 for 450. Last week, I had the Jaguars. I had them, they covered, but I also had them on the money line, plus 400, 402 to be exact. And look, Jacksonville was poised to win the game. They were driving for the late score, down 23-17, an extra point and a touchdown would have put him over the top, and unfortunately, Trevor Lawrence fumbled the football. Now, he only ended up with 162 yards of passing, but he had 12 yards in the first half. So he amassed 150 in the second half. And if you look the week prior, the Colts took on the Jets, opened up a huge lead. Josh Johnson, who hadn't taken the field except for 2 snaps since 2018, comes in 27 of 41, 319. I'm just not sold on that secondary. And Buffalo's been struggling, Josh Allen, with 2 deep coverage, but I don't think Indy's going to be able to contain the Bills here. Bills should rack up 31 to 34 points, win the game rather comfortably. I'll call it 31-17, 31-20. Bills win, get the cover.
All right, and the final game we'll look at, Paul, the Sunday night game out in Los Angeles, the Steelers and the Chargers. And we don't know if Ben Roethlisberger's playing yet. Mason Rudolph could be the guy again. And Rudolph wasn't bad against the Lions. I mean, he didn't fumble at the end, but, Pittsburgh's offense was kind of stuck last week against Detroit in that tie. And now the Steelers go out west. The Steelers have been a good underdog this year. Chargers have had their ups and downs, typical Chargers. It feels like they get off to a good start and then they just can't get any consistency. But what do you think here with the Chargers laying nearly a touchdown against the Steelers?
I'm just going to tell you, I'm in Vegas and I saw the number at the MGM and it was 9:15, and normally 9:15 I'm just about heading to bed. Not always, but sometimes. But I ran out to grab the number at 6.5 because I think it's way too much against the Charger team. They simply can't stop the run. And now you've got guys on defense that are out. Joey Bosa probably will not play on Sunday due to COVID. He doesn't have it, but obviously there's some precautionary issues there with respect to exposure. Cornerback Davis probably out. Linebacker Natalie out. Now you've got 2 defensive tackles in Linval Joseph and Tillery, who likely will be out. And this is a defense that can ill afford to have injuries because they just can't stop anybody to begin with. I think they're allowing around 5 yards per rush, and they've been gashed on defense repeatedly. And as you mentioned, the Steelers weren't really that bad on Sunday. There were a lot of there were weather issues. There were poor snaps. And as you mentioned, Mason Rudolph didn't fumble that last, he didn't fumble. So Steelers could have won that game. I was on the Lions and they covered. And fortunately, they knocked a lot of people out of the survivor pools because I'm still in the circuit contest and one of 170 out of the 4,400 that has a shot at the big prize. So I was pleased with the result. But I think you have to look towards next week. And in this case, I'm not looking at the Steelers of last week. I'm looking at them visiting LA. The preponderance of the fans are going to be backing the Steelers. It's going to sound like Pittsburgh. And I think they're going to win this game outright, Kevin. I honestly think the Steelers will prevail. So if you can get that 6.5 that I got last night, you should snag it right now.
I got to ask you this, Paul. So who do you got in the survivor pool this week?
I'm going to go with Cleveland. Because obviously, in looking at the field, twice as many have Tennessee remaining as Cleveland. So it's also from the standpoint that if Tennessee loses, it will eliminate more people. And as I said, I think Houston has a shot to win this one outright. I think Cleveland will get more support now that Jared Goff is questionable and may not play. And the line surged from 10 to 11.5. But I still think the Browns, off a loss, are the play. Although I'm concerned now because there are some injuries at the receiver position. And obviously, there's already injuries to the running backs, and Nick Chubb is out. So I'm a little concerned, but I think defensively, I don't see Detroit scoring more than 10 to 13 points. And I think Baker Mayfield and company should be able to muster some offense here, regardless of the injuries.
Finally, Paul, I got to ask about your Giants Monday night. They go to Tampa to face Brady and the Bucs. They hung with them last year in that Monday night game up at MetLife Stadium. They were there, and they've covered a few games in a row here, off the bye. Tampa Bay off the bad performance at Washington. They've struggled a little bit. I feel like they had this last year. They had a 4-game stretch. They didn't play well. But any thoughts here with the Giants on Monday night?
I hate commenting on the Giants or the Knicks because my fanhood sometimes comes through. Last year, I remember that game because I had a plastic bottle in my hand and threw it against the garage where I watch my games. And my neighbor said to me the next day, "Was there a problem last night? Did something happen?" And I didn't want to tell him it was because of the Giant game, but they had every opportunity to win that game last year. And look, Tampa Bay has shown that they are vulnerable. They've got some issues defensively, notably in the secondary. So who knows? I just know that 11 points seems a little bit frothy.
Any thoughts on your Knicks? They've been totally all over the place. They've lost to the Magic twice at home. They've lost to Cleveland at home. They beat Philadelphia twice. They've won at Chicago. Can you figure out this team, please?
Kevin, I can't. It's really disheartening. And they were, as you mentioned, 11.5-point favorites the other night. And I said, how can they lose to Orlando a second time? They're going to be paying attention, and they go out and lose to Orlando a second time. So what started out as a very promising year, I believe now they're 8-7. And they've got to do a lot better, and certainly they have the talent. And I hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's all I can tell you, Kevin.
Paul Bovi is hitting 65% in the regular season at Vegas Insider, 32, 17, and 2, 6-3 last week. Pretty good week. He hit the Dolphins, their win over the Ravens. That was pretty impressive. Also had the points with Detroit against Pittsburgh in that tie. Lions are that close. They'll win a game soon. We just don't know when. But Paul Bovi, check him out on Vegas Insider, NFL, NBA, college football, got all of that. Paul, thanks so much. We appreciate the time. Best of luck. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, there is Paul Bovi, and always enjoy talking to Paul. Diehard Knicks and Giants fan, and never easy with those teams. And the Knicks will turn around soon, you would hope. I mean, Division's a little bit wide open, but we'll see what happens. Taking a quick look before we get out of here, we have, man, it's a busy day. We have college football tonight. We have 4 games, and Southern Miss, Louisiana Tech, kind of a clunker in Conference USA. Louisiana Tech laying 15.5. Also, you have Memphis and Houston. That's a good game. Cougars laying 9 against the Tigers, but Memphis has been terrible on the road. Arizona's at Washington State. That's a very intriguing game because even though Arizona's 1-9 and Washington State's 5-5, both teams have been good ATS. Washington State was on a nice ATS streak before they lost to Oregon, and Arizona's covered 4 in a row, even though they've been pretty terrible. Their only win came against Cal, who lost about 20-something guys to COVID. Air Force and Nevada, good game in the Mountain West. Both teams at 7-3. Air Force laying 1. San Diego State laying 11 at UNLV. The Aztecs at 9-1. So a whole mess of college football tonight. And in the NBA this evening, among the games, the Warriors, you see that last night? Huge fourth quarter to beat Cleveland. Steph Curry, questionable. We'll see if he plays on the second end of the back-to-back. They're laying 7 at Detroit. Pacers, Hornets, rematch of that crazy opener. The Hornets came back and beat the Pacers, and Charlotte right now laying 1. Also, you have the Lakers and the Celtics in Boston. LeBron's a game-time decision. Lakers at 8-8, Boston at 7-8. Boston laying 1.5 there. Magic and the Nets in Brooklyn. Nets at 11-5. It seems like a disappointing 11-5 just because the expectations are so high, but Orlando's been competitive. And Nets laying 12.5. Milwaukee, a 13-point favorite against Oklahoma City. OKC at 6-8. Clippers laying 3.5 at New Orleans. That's interesting considering that New Orleans is 2-14, and they have been just, I mean, we know the issue with Zion being hurt, but they've blown some big leads the last 2 games against the Heat and also against the Wizards. The Bulls and Nuggets in Denver, final game of that road trip for Chicago. Nuggets laying 3.5. They're coming off a pretty ugly loss to the 76ers last night, a very undermanned 76ers team. Mavs and Suns, second game of their little 2-game set. Phoenix has won 10 straight. They beat Dallas the other night. They came back and won. Luka still he's doubtful tonight. He was out the other night. He's doubtful. Raptors and the Kings in Sacramento. Kings back at home, and they're laying 3.5 there against Toronto. Raptors, they have not been good recently. They were blown out by Utah last night. And college basketball, ton of games, of course, again, because we're underway with college basketball. And you have the Charleston Classic continuing, the Myrtle Beach Invitational, Paradise Jam in St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, the Empire Classic in Northridge, California, and then in Las Vegas, Wichita State, Arizona at 10, Michigan, UNLV at 12:30 tonight. And Michigan laying 12.5 in that one. UNLV comes in at 3-0. Before we exit today, you know who we're going to talk about. You know by this point. If you don't, we'll tell you anyway. It's BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. For new players only, bet $10 to win $200. That's right. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line. If your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Must be 21 years or older to play, and it's eligible in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. My thanks to Kyle Hunter for talking college football, Paul Bovi talking NFL. Those two guys, some of the best handicappers out there. They're on fire. By the way, Kyle Hunter, number 1 in college football this season. He continues that 70%. Paul Bovi has had a great regular season in the NFL, and you can check out both their picks at Vegas Insider. So very excited to talk to those two guys. And before we go, actually, we got to give out our best bets for the NFL this week. Didn't want to do that before exiting. We went 0-2 2 weeks ago, bounced back 2-0 last week. So let's go 2-0 again. Here are the picks. All right. I took San Francisco Monday night against the Rams, and that was a nice winner, easy winner. Pretty much, as they say, no sweat. It was a good job by the 49ers. Now they go out to Jacksonville. All right, I know what you're going to say. Short week, East Coast, all that stuff. But with Jacksonville, they've played very well the last few games. Against Buffalo, beat them outright. Hung with Indianapolis. They got into a hole in that game. They came back, made it interesting. I just think now San Francisco, considering their road success, 3 of their 4 wins away from the Bay Area, I think this is a good opportunity here for the 49ers to get back into the wild card race in the NFC. There's still lots to play for. They get this win, they're 5-5, and the season is still alive for them. And they get Minnesota next week, and that's another wild card type game. The loser pretty much goes home, or the loser won't make the playoffs. So San Francisco with some opportunities here to get back into the race. Not necessarily the NFC West race, but at least the wild card race. And Jacksonville, I think after 2 great performances, they may take a step back coming up this week. And I like Seattle against – wait, I messed this one up. I apologize. I messed this one up. I need to – I don't know why I did that. There's a reason behind this. Hold on one second. I'm blaming the graphics person, who's basically me. All right, let's try this again. Okay. You saw Cardinals plus 2.5 on the screen. That is not the play. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense because the Cardinals are only 2.5. All right. Seattle plus 2.5. Why? Number one, coming off the shutout last week against Green Bay, or at Green Bay, they were shut out. And Seattle, they're a home dog. Again, you've seen them as a home dog a few times this year. They covered against New Orleans. They lost to the Rams game. Russell Wilson got hurt. Seattle faces an Arizona team. Kyler Murray's supposed to come back this week. We don't know. He missed last week's game against Carolina. They lost. Arizona, so far this year, at least inside the NFC West, they were an underdog against San Francisco. Granted, Kyler didn't play, won outright. They were an underdog at the Rams, won outright. Now they're laying points against Seattle. And Arizona's had success against Seattle, but also they've been an underdog in a lot of those spots. And remember last year when Seattle went to Arizona, that was the DK Metcalf. Remember that was the interception when he chased down the defender before he got to the end zone. Seattle was laying 3 in that game. They were in control of that when Arizona came back and won. And Arizona now flipped in this situation to a road favorite. And look, they should be the favorite because they're 8-2 and Seattle's 3-6. And Seattle has not been good offensively. But I just think in this spot here, Seattle getting points at home. Kyler was banged up at the end of that Green Bay game. He's missed the last 2 games. Now you just plug him back in. Lumen Field is a very tough place to play, regardless of Seattle's record. I think Seattle, they come back, and I would be surprised if they won this game outright, honestly, against Arizona. So those are the 2 picks, San Francisco and Seattle. Not Arizona, Seattle. All right, so that's what our look is for this week in the NFL. We'll look to keep it up. And again, my thanks to Kyle Hunter and Paul Bovi for joining the show today. Here's the deal next week. So Monday we'll be on with you. Dave Sherapan will join us as usual Monday spot. But then we're off the rest of the week for Thanksgiving. All right, I'll be out of town. So Tuesday through Friday, no shows. So Monday we're back. And then after that, we'll be back the following Monday. I'll remind you again Monday. But Tuesday through Friday next week, no shows with the Thanksgiving week. So just want to put that out there for you, for all of our loyal viewers. We appreciate it. If you're a new viewer, we appreciate you tuning in as well. So that's all for today. We'll be back with you at noon on Monday. I am Kevin Rogers, and as always, best of luck with your bets.